Hi, debaters. So today we are in video 107, speech times and goals. We're going to talk about what are the times for every speech, what order are they in, and what are you supposed to do during those speeches. And we're not going to include cross-examination today because we're going to cover that in a separate video. So this is the speech times and the order they come in. The first four speeches are constructive speeches. The last four speeches are rebuttal speeches. And that's going to be important later when we talk about what the difference is. You'll also notice the constructive speeches are all 4 minutes long and rebuttals are 2 minutes long. And it goes affirmative, negative, affirmative, negative, negative, affirmative, negative, affirmative. So halfway through the debate, it switches and the negative gets to talk twice in a row. And we'll talk about why that is and how to deal with that when we get there. So what do you do in each speech? So the first affirmative constructive, sometimes called the 1AC, is 4 minutes long. And what you're supposed to do is lay out the main arguments for the affirmative side. So the first affirmative speaker will come up and they will say, here's the plan we want to pass, and here's the good things that would happen by doing it. And to do that, they have to read a plan text and at least one advantage, and that advantage has to have a piece of uniqueness, solvency, and impact evidence. You can have more than one of each of those types of evidence if you want. Like you could read all 3 impact cards if you want, if you have time. Or you could also read a second advantage as long as it has uniqueness, solvency, and impact. It's up to you. But at minimum, you have to have plan text, uniqueness, solvency, and impact. The reason it's called a constructive is because you're constructing your argument, right? You're building it up, you're making it better. So the same way you would build a house, you would need plans on how to build it. You'd need the right materials. You need to put it in the right order in order to make it all make sense together, right? So the affirmative constructive is sort of the same way. You have to have a plan for how you're going to build it. You have to have the right parts. You have to put them together in the correct way. And if you use the example 1AC, that'll do that for you. Or you can make your own 1AC as long as you have those pieces for it. Next speech is the first negative constructive. This is also 4 minutes long. It's the first time the negative gets to speak. And just like the other speech, this is where the negative lays out their main points. So the main point of the speech is, why would the world be worse if the judge passes the plan? So to answer that question, the negative doesn't have to respond to every single affirmative argument. They just have to choose specific parts that show why, if the plan was passed, the world would get worse. So if you're a rookie, that probably means you have to use the turns on case, whether it's solvency turns or impact turns. If you're a novice or above, you could use the disadvantage or the critique to show that passing the plan would actually make the world worse. The third speech in the debate is the second affirmative constructive, also 4 minutes long. So this is where things start to get interesting. Because if you're the second affirmative constructive, what you have to do is you have to figure out what the other team said and figure out how you're going to respond to it. So this will be different in every debate because every 1NC is going to have different arguments in it. So you have to respond differently to them in all the debates. So in order to do this, you have to identify their arguments. And then once you've identified what the problem is, you can either read more evidence to support your point, say why your evidence is better. Maybe it's more specific or the author is better or something, or it's more recent. You could say why their argument doesn't apply, like maybe the facts and examples aren't true of what you're trying to do. Or you could say why even if their argument is true, it doesn't matter. Like let's say the negative says, oh, passing the affirmative is only 50% likely to solve climate change, not 100%. As the affirmative, you can be like, fine, maybe we're only 50% likely to solve climate change, but in the world today, we're 0% likely. So 50% likelihood to solve climate change is still better than 0%. So the judge should vote affirmative at the end of the debate, obviously. You should also extend your arguments that your opponents didn't counter. So if they didn't answer some of your arguments like uniqueness, solvency, impact, whatever, you should tell the judge that and tell them that by not answering it, they functionally agree with you. So you're winning that argument. At the end of this speech, you want to be able to briefly explain to the judge why passing the plan is still a good idea. So if you remember, we talked about the 1AC, the first affirmative constructive, as building a house, constructing a house. This is the part where you kind of got to go do some repairs and fix it up and maybe add on to it because the negative is going to be attacking it. Okay, The next speech is the first negative constructive and also the first negative rebuttal. So in this speech, you're going to defend against the attacks on your arguments. So as the negative side, you have to stand up and say, okay, the 2AC just attacked our arguments. Now we're going to defend against them. And you can do the same things, right? Read more evidence. Say why your evidence is better. Say why their argument doesn't apply. Say why even if their argument is true, it doesn't matter. All that stuff is all things that you can do. Additionally, you want to extend your arguments that your opponents did not counter. The difference, so the reason these two speeches are together is because the second negative constructive comes right before the first negative rebuttal. So the affirmative doesn't get a chance to respond to these speeches in their own speech. So if you're the second negative constructive or the first negative rebuttal, you need to make sure that you're covering different points. Maybe one of you talks about solvency, and one of you talks about impacts, or one of you talks about counter plan, one of you talks about the disad. The point is, because the affirmative doesn't have time to respond, you need to cover different things so that you're not wasting your time. And the point here is you want to keep scoring points, like showing the affirmative is going to cause bad things to happen if they pass it, but you also need to be defending too. You need to say, you know, if we pass the affirmative, the world won't be as good as the affirmative says it will be. So you need to stop their arguments. You need to make your own arguments in order to show the judge why you're winning. Okay, now we get to the first affirmative rebuttal, which is probably the hardest speech in the debate. So in the first affirmative rebuttal, you only have 2 minutes. So you're not going to be able to cover everything that's going on in the debate, and you're not going to be able to go super in depth. So what you need to do is you need to find the most important arguments in the debate and prove to the judge why you're winning them. So that you might, probably that'll be something like, you prove that you're solving the problem, or that the impact to your 1AC advantage is really big. That's bigger than anything the negative talks about. Because if you show those two things, that the impact is going to be really big and that only the affirmative solves it, you'll probably win the debate. But whatever's going on in your debate, you have to figure out, what are the main arguments in here? How can I explain to the judge we're winning them? And then why does that mean that the judge should vote affirmative? For the second negative rebuttal, again, this is 2 minutes and this is the negative's last speech. So you got to make it count. But you're going to do the same things. Instead of trying to cover every issue, you're going to find a couple really important parts of the debate, and you're going to explain to the judge why your team is winning them. And then you're going to explain to the judge why, if you're winning those arguments, that means that voting for the negative would be a good idea, because voting for the affirmative would make the world a worse place, right? So look at your arguments in the debate and say, if I only win 2 or 3 of these, which ones would be the one that would show that voting affirmative would make the world a worse place? And then you explain those to the judge, make sure you win those, and you tell the judge a quick little story about why voting affirmative would make the world worse. Again, I said better, but I actually mean worse because it's negative. Okay. Then the final speech in the debate is the second affirmative rebuttal. So in the second affirmative rebuttal, again, you want to narrow it down to just a few issues. And instead of trying to compare with the other team about who's more right or who's more wrong and cover every issue, you just select a few different things and you prove you're winning those arguments. And if you win those arguments, voting affirmative would make the world a better place. So really pay attention, try to look at your flow in the arguments and figure out what are the 2 or 3 arguments that, if you win, would show that voting affirmative leads to a better world. And then explain that to the judge. And if you do that, you're almost certainly going to win the debate. Okay, that's all the speeches. But at the end of the debate, make sure you shake hands with your opponent, or if we're online, tell them, good job, hey, great debate. Tell your judge thank you, and then listen to the judge's feedback, and make sure you write down some of the things they have to say so that you can tell your coach and you can go practice and get better for the next debates. So that's the speech order, that's the speech times and what to do. I hope this helped out a lot, and good luck with your debates.